Hey Kids Cook Real Food, Mrs. Kimball here for the Healthy Parenting Connector, where, as always, we strive to connect parents who so desperately want to raise healthy kids with the experts who have the information they need. And we know anxiety is like on a scary upward trend like this. So I asked Andi Grandy, who I heard speak locally here, to come on today and talk about teens and anxiety. And she is just going to be spot on with this information. Thank you so much, Andi, for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
This is going to be good, you guys. So I was at, I volunteer with high school youth group. So we go to these little sessions where we are required to learn. And I saw adolescence and anxiety. And I thought, this will be very interesting to see where the speaker goes, because you just never know. And Andi's talking along and I'm just inside. I'm just like, yes, yes. And I'm like participating in class. She keeps looking at me like, you kind of seem to know this topic a little bit. I'm like, oh yeah, I dig in. But she is an expert because she's a couples and family therapist here in Grand Rapids, Michigan. So she's a licensed professional counselor, a limited license marriage and family therapist with a master's degree in counselor education. Or what is it? It's long. Marriage, couples, and family
Such
therapy.
A long title.
Oh, did that fit on your degree?
I think they squeezed it in, yeah.
Okay. As at home, she's a mom of a beautiful, feisty 3-year-old. And what's awesome about being a therapist is she knows why toddler brains and teenage brains have so much in common. So we'll dig into that a little bit today. And she loves helping busy moms get those real practical ways, beyond the theory, to handle the hard parenting moments. And when you put toddler and teenager in one sentence, that's the definition of hard parenting moments right there.
An emotional roller coaster.
Totally. Maybe we should just start with that, because now I'm like, where are my notes? I forgot that part.
Sure.
What are similar between a toddler brain and a teenage brain?
So the same waves of different waves of brain development are happening at those ages. So we know as toddlers grow, their brains are growing at an extraordinarily large rate. Lots of new connections are being formed. But what's a little bit less common, we see teenagers' bodies changing, but their brains are also going through another phase of development. And what happens is their brains are going through a process called myelination, which means connections are being strengthened. So you see emotional roller coaster, big emotional storms happening at both of those same ages. And what's beautiful about teens, beautiful and challenging, is that the brain development happens from the most primal brain to the most mature part of the brain is the last part to develop. So all of those skills that we're like, why can't a teenager do that? Just think better, be more empathetic, make better choices. Those skills are literally coming online as a teenager. And so they don't have them when they're 13, 15. Nowadays they're saying it happens through mid-20s. So it takes a long time.
Yeah. So anytime you're, on Zoom with your kid's classroom and it glitches a little, that's the teenage brain. It's not quite fully there yet. Not quite fully formed.
Exactly. And I think
amazing.
Also it's a little bit easier, I think, for us as humans to look at a toddler having a big emotional roller coaster with some compassion and understanding, because we're like, oh, they're so little. Of course this is hard. But teenagers look big and they're not as cuddly. And so it's a little bit harder for us to remember that it's hard to be a teenager. And it's just when we also feel reactive to whatever they're dealing with, and we feel like the high pressure stakes of we want them to have good outcomes, it's a little bit harder for us to slow down and remember. Being a teenager is not a cakewalk.
Yeah. And then if we're reacting, it's bouncing back and forth with what's going on in their brain. So that's difficult. That's really hard work for the brain to sort of detach the immature pieces and reattach in more mature ways. Is that kind of fair? And is that one reason why they eat so many calories too?
I don't know about that.
Oh, okay.
My program did not study nutrition, so I'm not going to pretend to know, but it makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, everything is growing in their body.
Yeah,
now,
exactly.
Yeah. So we know what's the official stat? Is it 1 in 3 teens are anxious, or is that even?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I think now in the United States, we're almost saying 1 in 3 humans are dealing with anxiety. So the rates, again, are just growing exponentially.
So one of my favorite parts of hearing you speak in person was when you kind of walked through some myths and some facts about maybe why, theories, right? It's all theory, technically, about why teens might be more anxious now than in the 50s.
Yeah. Yes.
So what do parents maybe need to think about with reasons?
Yeah, well, so I'm sorry, my hair is being funny. So many, when this started getting more and more well known, and we were seeing like self-harm and hospitalizations and suicide attempts all increasing, we were like, what is going on with these teenagers? And so of course researchers want to find an answer. And we were looking at, well, is the world just harder? Is life more dangerous? And we would say maybe, but that's not, like, responding to danger is not anxiety. Anxiety is overestimating threat or underestimating your ability to handle it. So that wouldn't really be considered an anxiety if you're responding to hard things, whether economically or you're living in poverty or violence. That doesn't really make sense.
It's your perception of the threat. I have to slow you down because I think
Yeah.
that's so important to have that definition.
Yeah.
Anxiety is overestimating the threat.
Mm-hmm.
Something is out there and it's bigger than reality in your mind.
Yes.
Or underestimating your ability to handle it.
Yes. So basically, another way of saying that is anxiety is kind of tripping our brain into fight or flight in a situation that doesn't deserve a fight or flight response, like doesn't require our whole biological fight off danger response. It's not helpful in that situation.
Right. Which makes sense. So then that makes sense that the situations aren't causing the anxiety. So what else do we have to look at?
Yeah. So another thing we looked at was like, well, parenting has parenting changed? Are parents putting too much pressure on kids? And, you know, I do hear often over and over the exact same words actually from parents, like, and from teenagers. So the pressure is either from parents or for themselves of like, I have to get a perfect grade on this test, otherwise I'm not going to fail this class, and then I'm not going to get into college. And they spiral all the way to this phrase that I've heard more than once of, or I'm going to live in a box on the street. But you can see that such extreme black and white catastrophic thinking, which makes that test actually feel like a life or death situation. So they said, you know, is pressure increasing? And in some ways pressure is increasing. We do hear that narrative more and more. Another theory was, well, we also have these parents who are like very helicopter-y and they hover over their kids and they're curating their experience and trying to make sure they have like a perfect, beautiful childhood. Or there's the lawnmower approach where I go in front of my kid and I just mow down every obstacle. And so I make things really, really easy for my child. And again, good intentions with some of that in parenting, but the results are not great because you're sending a message to your kid. I don't think you can handle it. I'm going to make sure that you never have to handle it. And so kids don't gain the skills they need to handle hard situations. Because even if you as a parent can protect your kid from hard things in your home, eventually they have to go out into the world. And eventually they're going to have to hear no from the world. And we want them to have the skills to handle all of that from people they love before the world has to say no to them or disappoint them and things like that.
So this is a little piece. We're giving them fewer tools perhaps than past generation.
Possibly. Yeah.
A little bit.
But then when researchers really zoomed out and they looked at, okay, rates of anxiety and what was happening, the really big thing that happened was the adaptation of smartphones. And all of a sudden, all of us are plugged into screens constantly. And we know that time spent on screens decreases a lot of things that contribute to mental health. So time spent on screens decreases time being active, decreases time being outdoors, decreases face-to-face interaction, which then makes face-to-face interaction feel less comfortable and challenging because you don't get to like edit your responses and that kind of thing. So I hear a lot of I have some clients who really prefer to just text their friends. They'll say, I talked to my friend, and I'm like, did you talk? And they're like, well, no, I texted. And so they use those words interchangeably.
Wow.
You know, time spent on screens decreases the amount of time that we're bored, which means we're not being as creative because we don't have to manage our boredom. It's always able to just turn on our little screen and get a hit of excitement. So all of these things, they're saying, we don't know exactly what the fallout will be, but we do see a correlation to the adaptation of smartphones over 50% and this great big jump in anxiety and depression in young people.
Okay. So, I mean, it was like on the timeline, the graph
the correlation happened.
Up.
Exactly.
Wow.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's pretty powerful. I know, I just heard my friend, Dr. Nicole Berkins, who's local as well. She's a child psychologist. And she was saying in her family, she has older teens and young adults. And she talks about screen use as like when you make the decision about what you should be doing with your time, if the screen use is displacing something else, which is what you just said, movement, time, face time, connection with family, responsibilities you should be doing. She said that's when it's a problem.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, that's such a good word, like displacing. If you're displacing something else you should be doing, now the screens are becoming a problem. So, okay, so the screens are potentially anxiety inducing. We're going to tackle the times a little bit because we're recording this in the middle of April, right when, and here in Michigan, we've been off school about 5 weeks now. The country is experiencing like our first pandemic of the modern world with technology in place, and it's a lifesaver for so many right now.
Thank
We're
goodness
able
we
to
have
do
technology.
distance learning. Yeah, we're able to still kind of connect with our friends sort of face to face for those who want to. But I also hear a lot of parents worrying like, oh my gosh, like they're on screens all day, teens and little kids too. Like, what do I do? How do you think that this maybe quarantine time? So I guess 2 questions here. One, how is this changing teens' experience of anxiety that you've heard? Because there's no school to go to, and school anxiety is a big deal. But 2, like, what should parents be kind of doing differently maybe with screens during this time? I don't know, whatever order you want to do that. These are just like things people need to know.
Right. I mean, it's really interesting. So a lot of my practice is working with teens or families in trying to deal, especially with anxiety that's causing avoidance, because anxiety often tells people just avoid the thing that is hard. Run away. Then you won't have your anxiety anymore. So that is definitely an effective solution to anxiety, except then you don't learn any tools of how to manage your anxiety. You're just avoiding the thing. So a lot of my practice is dealing with teens and anxiety, and especially anxiety that makes you want to avoid youth group or avoid going to school or avoid driver's training. So I have quite a few teen clients who, for right now, the pandemic has kind of solved their anxiety.
Okay.
Because they're not having to confront a lot of the things that were making them feel anxious. Now, there are different forms of anxiety. I mean, they're finding other things to be anxious about. I'm anxious about how long is this going to go on? I'm anxious about appearing okay on a Zoom call, and do I have to show my video? I mean, there's still plenty of stuff. I'm anxious about the fact that my friends aren't responding to me as quickly as I want them to, all of these things.
Sure. If your brain wants to overblow a situation, this is a perfect example how it's not completely about the situation.
Yeah.
Right? It's
well, I would check our language on that a little bit, because I don't think a brain is wanting to do that. I think a brain gets habituated to do that, right?
Got it.
Brains like familiar pathways. And so that feeling of anxiety is just a habit.
Okay. Oh, that's good. Thank you for correcting that.
Yeah. I'm totally forgetting the conversation. So I do think anxiety is still present. I also expect, just based on the clients that I work with, that when we do get to go out about in the world again and have to start school, have to start wearing regular clothes again, all of those things. I know I'm going to not be excited about that. I know that I expect that there will be another struggle with anxiety, because we're going to get out of the habit in a lot of ways. Yeah. But in terms of, okay, so if screen time is part of the problem with anxiety, do we just cut them out of screens even during this time? I would say wholeheartedly no. I think, again, it's like being really purposeful about how we're using these screens. So again, can we use these screens as a tool for connection, for learning, all of those things? Thank gosh we have that technology. I'm so glad we have that technology. But we also do want to really deeply know what our kids are doing, because part of the problem with the social media and the screens, and especially things like TikTok and Snapchat and Instagram, is it's so built to be a quick dose of dopamine and serotonin, all those happy chemicals. And so you kids can just numb out so easily, right? So if I'm feeling bad, or I don't want to think about something, or I'm bored, I pick up my screen and I can just scroll, and I'm always going to find something interesting.
Yeah.
But again, if we're just constantly numbing, just the same way as if I constantly dealt with my hard emotions with drinking, eventually that's going to become a problem. We want them to have other skills besides numbing out on the screen. So I think the number one thing parents can do, which I almost don't want to add another to-do for parents in this time because it's hard, is just to be aware of what their teens are doing on screen, how are they using them, and then are there other ways that they can get feelings of connection, satisfaction, and activity, so that the screen isn't the like best and only thing they have going for them right now.
Is there and I'm asking as a parent of a teenager,
Yes,
practical way to know? Like, do you advocate for sort of like the apps where parents can see what the kids are doing? Would you ever have a kid like time track for a couple days just so that they could see how they were spending their time? Or
I mean, let's do ideal, and then let's do how it probably goes down in a lot of families,
Perfect.
right?
Yes.
So ideally, with all problems, a therapist is going to say, invite your kid into the problem, which I do love this, right? And when we can do it, it's beautiful. But like, present to your child, like, okay, I know screens are important. I know your social life is on the screen, and man, so is mine, and we need to keep that going. But here's some of the concerns I have. Like, if you're spending all of your time sedentary in a dark room looking at a screen, how do you think that's going to affect your mood? So kind of say, what are some ways? Can we build a schedule together? Can we build some limits together so that we make sure we're also doing other things that give us life, that we're having board games or dinners together, or we're cooking together, or we're going outside. And also that requires that the parent models it and participates too, right? Like,
good point. Yep.
If I want to do all that, I have to do it. Otherwise, what? Like, a teenager is always good at finding the contradiction, right? So, we have to model that. So ideally we would have that, kumbaya family meeting, which there are families who do this, and I think it's awesome. And for other families, they don't have enough time. There's already conflict and just hard power struggles between teenagers. And I think at that point, it's okay and it's good for parents to still set up a structure. So even if you get a negative response from structure, from setting some boundaries in your family, that doesn't mean it was a bad idea. That just means it's hard. And again, when we do hard in our families, we're teaching our kids to deal with hard. So the trick as a parent is to say, I'm going to let my decisions be guided by my values, versus like when I got a hard response from my teenager and they didn't like that, I stopped setting that boundary. So this happens in pandemic or non-pandemic life, right? Where we know good practice is to take your kids' screens away from them at a certain time at night so they can go to sleep uninterrupted. It's not very reasonable for a family to expect a teenager to regulate themselves and to set healthy boundaries. It's a rare teenager that can do that. Frankly, I have adult clients who don't do that. They're like, I mean to go to bed at whatever time, but I'm up 4 hours later scrolling and feeding anxiety and all that, right? Because we're humans, and screens are designed to be addictive, and they're set up under so it's just easy to not do that. So I say to parents, take that responsibility off of your teenager to put in a structure and a boundary. We do that as parents. We say, at this time, we're not going to have screens, whether it's meal times, bedtimes, or you want to say, like, this is the amount of screen that we do for learning, and this is the amount of screen that you do for social, and then we have to do other things. That's a great policy. If it's like, if you do X, Y, and Z first, then you can have your screen. I just encourage parents to figure out what works for them, and also remember, just because a teenager doesn't love it, doesn't mean it's bad for them. Because again, there's so many things as an adult that we have to do that we're not like, this is the best, but I'm still required to do it. And that is a life skill that we need to help our teenagers. We need to teach our teenagers.
That is such a good reminder.
Yes. And the trick is, instead of making that a power struggle where you just say, like, I'm the parent and this is what we're going to do, you can still empathize with your teenager about how they feel about it and hold the boundary. So much of my work with parents is doing this, what I call a two-handed approach, where I say to the parents, first you validate and you see their emotions and you say, this sucks. You're mad because so many of your friends get to be on their phones all the time and you feel like you're missing out. And that's really hard. And in this house, from this time to this time, all of our phones are getting put away. So just because I empathize and understand your emotions doesn't mean I change my boundary. But I have to do this first, because otherwise I'm basically saying, I don't care about the relationship. I'm just pushing boundaries on you.
That is so good. I am like literally eating this up, because just yesterday, like, we've had a rule in our house, like no screens in the rooms at night. But the more screens my teenager got, the more they live in his room. Like, he has a desk, he has 2 laptops, one from school, one from home. And just yesterday I was like, how many, like, where are your devices being plugged in nowadays? Like, I forget our
Oh
own
my gosh, right.
rules. I'm like, oh my gosh, I think he has 5 devices in his room every night.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe he never touches them. But who knows? Like, maybe temptation will start next week. So we said, you need to park your screens downstairs. And oh my gosh, it was a disaster of a conversation.
Yeah.
So I'm definitely like my struggle now, and I think probably lots of parents who are really intentional are like, if I always set the boundaries, I'm not teaching that self-regulation. So that's that ideal situation, right? Where you bring the child in. But I don't know, do you have any thoughts on transitioning from like parent sets boundaries to how do we get the teens to care for themselves so that when they're going to college, they're not just like, woohoo, no more boundaries.
Yeah. Well, I think, okay, so self-regulation and starting up some discipline and boundaries for yourself is a skill. We learn every skill by doing it badly first. Okay. Right. So like I have a 3-year-old. I am trying to teach her that we are supposed to put our dishes in the dishwasher after meals. So it seems really basic, but it's not for a 3-year-old because she's instantly ready to do something else. So she has to forget and be reminded and do it badly and have a big fight or, all these things, do it badly before she's regularly going to do that. I do know it's possible because she's learned other things by doing it badly first. Like she learned how to eat with utensils by doing it really badly, and then she got good. But I had to tolerate all that bad before it got good. If I said, oh, you're doing such a bad job at eating with a spoon, let me just take it over from you, she would have never learned.
True.
But I am a big proponent of, I think college and post like living in your parents' house is exactly where we learn all of that stuff. Right? That's when we learn, oh, if I eat ice cream for every meal, I'm not going to feel good and I'm going to gain a lot of weight. Right. If I wait till the last minute for all of my homework assignments, I'm going to have really bad grades. So I'm a proponent of those are the appropriate tasks for young adulthood. And that's when the brain is like, has more of the development done where they can do that. I think it's okay for parents to do that. Now, as they're about to launch, you do want to kind of sort of give them more of that. But I think it's okay to say in our house, these are our expectations because they have experience of boundary life. When they go to college and they have no boundaries, or when they move out and they have no boundaries, they can compare and contrast.
Sure. Okay. Well, that just gave me a grand permission. Thank you.
Yes.
For that.
And the trick of that is that the reason that's hard as parents is because we have catastrophe thoughts where we're like, if I don't teach them to do that, when they get to college, they're going to be blah, 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 right? They're going to be sleeping in dirty clothes and like failing other classes and on their screens all the time. And so our job is to manage how scary or difficult that thought is. That's our worry, and it's our job to manage that and to allow them, like, some of that's going to go badly. There's very few college kids who go to school and go away to college for the first time and like have a regular bedtime and eat perfectly healthy and, have a regular exercise routine and keep up on all their homework. No, nobody, we don't do that. Why would we expect our kids to do that? So it's okay to allow them to fail or whatever, because that's how you learn.
That's awesome. So maybe to make an analogy, like I'm going to teach my kids how to do laundry, how to turn on the machine, how to get it through, how to sort, how to fold, but they may not need to be 100% responsible for the process or the habit of doing their own laundry at age 8, or maybe even at age 14. I can tell them when it's laundry day, just like I can tell them when the structure of screens is, because then that's teaching them the skill of like how to manage screens. Hopefully they'll use that later once they fail a few times.
Yeah, absolutely. That's my theory. I have a 3-year-old. It's an untested theory in my home, but I have seen, like clients and really, even with the laundry, or like so often I'll have parents who say, they don't even get up for school on their own. And I'm like, well, how do they get up for school? And they're like, we go in there and then we go in again and then we go in again. And I'm thinking, well, why would they ever have to learn to get up for school on their own? Because they have never needed to. So if you want them to have a skill, you have to give them the opportunity to do that. And again, but it's also okay for them to not have all the skills.
Yes.
So it's really about knowing your kid and knowing which is appropriate. And, you want the fine line of like understanding where they are and gently pushing at the same time.
Yes. I love that so much. And we will definitely link back to 2 of my favorite interviews of all time, Jessica Leahy, the author of The Gift of Failure, which is totally what we're talking about. We learn through failure. And if we do the helicoptering and the lawn mowing, we're not helping our kids in any way. And Julie Lythcott-Haims, author of How to Raise an Adult, who saw all these completely and socially, emotionally incompetent or college freshmen coming onto campus with the parents like doing the college tour for them and asking all the questions for them. And she's like,
and picking their classes. And
oh, no.
yes, exactly. And
So
so
good.
much of that is so much of my work with parents is figuring out what's their responsibility and their problem and what's yours. And so often our problem as parents is to manage our worry about the outcome, which is hard. It's very hard. Right?
It is. So you talked about a lot of teens you work with want to avoid that's their solution to anxiety. And I'm sure a lot of parents are thinking, I've seen that in my teen or in my 8-year-old. So respond to that like avoidance approach.
Yeah. So, I mean, I see a lot of different options, right? Where parents, they like, well, it's really hard for them. And I love my kid and I don't want them to suffer. So then we've got that extreme side where the parent is kind of accommodating the anxiety because we're showing love to our kid, which we should always try to do. And then we have the other extreme where the parent's like, knock it off, you're going to school. If you don't go to school, I'm going to start taking privileges away from you, which that can lead to a lot of problems of like power and control. And a really anxious kid will say, you're going to take my cell phone away from me if I don't go to school? Fine, take it. I don't care. My anxiety is bigger and I'd rather not have to. Like you just basically taught me what I can do to not go to school. I can just give you my cell phone. I've even seen people like offer to pay like every day you go to school you can have $20. That's an extraordinarily high rate, I would assume, for like it gets expensive really quickly, but that's another one where the kid can say, well, I don't care about $20, so I'm not going to go to school. So you don't want to use bribes, you don't want to use punishment, and you don't want to accommodate the anxiety. So this is again where I say this two-handed approach where you validate and you express deeply that you understand and care and that you have confidence that they can do this, right? So this is hard. You feel really anxious. You feel lonely. You feel like no one likes you and you're just being tortured to go there. That's super hard. And I'm sorry this is so hard for you. And I know you can do it. And I know every day you do it, it will get a little bit easier. So what can you do to manage those emotions?
Oh, that's just so beautiful to give parents the language they need. Like it's right. I was thinking like, well, yeah, we can't just be permissive and not not make them go at all. We can't have the tough love and give them the consequences. We can't like bribe them. And it's like, what is sort of in the middle of that? And that's perfect. Yeah.
And I think so often parents are like, but how do I decide? How do I decide when they can skip something versus I should make them do it? And what I try to remind people is that you don't want to make anxiety the deciding factor in your life. So you don't want anxiety deciding whether or not you do something. You want your values and your passions and your purpose to decide. So I worked with a family who was wanting their child to participate in a religious ed program, but the kid was hating it. The downtimes before and after, when the kids are all on their cell phone and this kid didn't have a cell phone and didn't know where to hang out and just feeling horrible about that. So the family's like, well, she's being tortured. Is this helpful? But we really want this to happen. And I said, well, then you have to have the values drive the decision and figure out, okay, this is what we're going to do. What can we do to make it as better as possible? How can we support you as you do this really hard thing?
And how did they, because I'm like tempted to say, well, maybe they could bring them late and miss that weird time. I'm assuming that wasn't the solution.
So that again, like some of that, again, that's an avoidance, right? Like just don't go to that. So some of that was working with the involving the child. So the parent doesn't just do this all on their own. Again, the parent can't be the tool with which we deal with anxiety, but involving the child. Who are some people that you know would be good to hang out with? Involving the leaders and having them identify peer leaders who could be kind of like eyes out and inclusive, and that kind of thing. And they also did change some structures about, do we need cell phones here? Is this like actually supporting our purpose for this activity.
I love that.
So I think that's really helpful, because if we're doing an event where we gather young people together for the purpose of making connections, cell phones are really working against you in that moment. Because it's, again, it's so much easier to just go on my cell phone than to make small talk. Right?
Yeah. Oh, that's avoidance right there for sure.
Totally. Absolutely. But yet small talk is really, I mean, it gets a lot of bad rap, especially among teenagers, but small talk is an important skill to be able to make connections with people before you dive into the heart of something. Like, I have to make small talk with my clients in the waiting room. If I dove into the heart of what we're going to talk about in session beforehand, they would feel so off put by that. Yeah. So it's an important skill.
That's fascinating. I just saw small talk on the list of like 11 things you should be practicing during this quarantine. I was like, so it's like fascinating to me that you just brought that back. Yeah. No, I totally agree. I know our youth minister was like, oh my gosh, this quarantine thing, this isolation, like I'm just so worried about kids' anxiety. Yeah. And I thought, like you said, there's a lot of social anxiety, and I wondered if it would decrease because they don't have to go to school. We had record numbers at our first Zoom youth group meeting. Yeah. I was like, I don't understand it. I don't get it. But I'm thinking he's like a super extrovert, so he just doesn't get it that someone could be uncomfortable in that weird time, that weird unstructured social time. And I'm thinking like the Zoom meeting doesn't have that.
It's so much easier.
It's so much easier. So it's fascinating. Yeah.
And they are more comfortable on their technology. That is where they spend a lot of their time. So for us, we're like, oh, this is an accommodation to the reality right now. But for them, they're like, this is fine. That's what we do anyway.
Yeah. So what about normal circumstances or quarantine? I think this answer will be pretty similar. How can parents try to create an anti-anxiety home life? Because we're not in control of a lot of things outside our walls. But are there like buffers that we can put up to help our kids work with their anxiety?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and we're not even in control of everything that happens inside our walls. True. Because now with social media, all of that is in our homes all the time. So they talk about that shift that happened is, when I was growing up, the internet was just starting to be a thing, and we had email, right? And that was how we connected to social life. But now, like, all of the social structures and things that are happening in school are still happening online. So there's no break. You don't leave your bully at school and see them and leave them there for the weekend. They're with you all the time now. So some things that parents can do is just kind of take a survey of what is the noise in their house. And I mean noise literally, but also just how cluttered is it? How busy is it? There's a great book that I love, especially for parents of little kids, called Simplicity Parenting. It just talks about how little we actually need for kids to do deep play and to do deep engagement. And I think that's really great. So it just sets the tone of like, do we need to have the television on all the time? Do we need to have noise going on all the time, background noise? That can be another part of your brain, is just constantly being engaged. And if a kid is anxious, quiet and calm is always more helpful. Okay. But even just in terms of like the environment, how much stuff is there? Routine and predictability, of course, help anxiety, because just dealing with unknown is harder. And then just normalizing failure and normalizing that sometimes we do hard things. So I encourage parents to model that and to talk about what they struggle with and to talk about how they managed that. I forget who came up with these 3 questions she asks her family every night, but I love them. The questions are, how were you brave today? How did you fail today? And how were you kind today? And just making those things normal. Like, I only have to be brave if something was hard. So let's talk about that. And I only had to fail. Yes, maybe I failed, but what did I learn out of that? That means I was doing something risky. So I love those questions, whether that's at the dinner table or when you're trapped in a car or whatever, and maybe you don't get to it every day, but you just have those conversations, I think are really helpful. And then, highlighting to kids how we talk about when they've persevered or when they overcame something difficult. Just noticing, like, I see that you really tried hard, or I see that you were really working on that, or you did not think you could do that and you totally did. And really, instead of affirming success with kids and like acknowledging their success, although that is important, acknowledging and complimenting their process and their character qualities and speaking about those things is so much more important, because we don't want our kids to think, I love you because you had a 4-point grade average, and I love you because you made this team. I love you because of who you are, and how I see you managing the world is so much more important.
That's great. It's a sobering thought to think that we can't leave our bullies at school anymore.
Yeah.
Just the way you put that, it's like, oh man. And so parents need this, it's a mental shift.
Yeah.
How we speak, how we demonstrate. I mean, I'm sure the opposite of doing the right thing would be just like beating yourself up and all the time in front of your kids, right? Oh, I can't believe I did that. I never get this right, right? Like,
Yeah.
that's like,
Well, and I think,
easy modeling, but that's bad modeling.
yeah. And I think what I hear more from kids is, my parents are perfect. Their life was easy. They've never struggled. They don't doubt themselves. And I think in some ways, parents do have to kind of, you want to provide reassurance to your kid that like, I'm in control, you are safe here, I got this. But can you balance that with, but I'm also a human and I make mistakes and I doubt myself and this was hard for me and I struggled. But so often kids can compare themselves to their parents, who I want to say to these kids, like, darling, your parents almost a finished product at this point. You are new. You get to be, you get to be struggling. But I think when parents can show the struggle, that's very important.
That's great. Yeah. Don't compare your messy middle to someone else's end.
Exactly.
Right. That's a great phrase. I know I have a couple of family friends who their family motto is, you were made to do hard things. And they've got it on the wall and they say that all the time. And it's such a good reminder. You were made to do hard things. So let's do it. One of my favorite tips from when I heard you speak in person, you said busy hands can't text.
Yes.
I was thrilled to hear cooking on your list of recommendations for families.
Yes.
So like, what do you see about work in the kitchen and food and family table time, other than just, keeping hands busy, which is a good tip.
Yeah. Well, and the reason I like keeping hands busy, it means you are doing something tactile. You're remembering you have a body, not just eyes and fingertips to click.
Yeah.
Right. And tactile skills like cooking require, like, it's not always going to go well. Right. And it's multi-steps. There's planning to do. You might have to swerve if you don't have something available, that kind of thing. And kids can see their progress, right? So I used to be able to make Easy Mac. Now I can make, okay, clearly this is the level we're at with our kids. Like now she can make pancakes, right? She can crack an egg and not get the shells in. That, seeing how you've made progress is such a confidence builder. And so I love that. And I think food in general brings people together. It relaxes us. There's a lot about nurturing when we feed each other. You know what I mean? And that's a good place for conversation. So I think cooking, and also that is just going to be a skill that serves everybody in the future. People who can cook generally can be healthier and they can be more inclusive and invite other people in. So I just think it's a great experience for kids to be able to do that.
Absolutely. My daughter, who's 11, has been doing a ton in the kitchen during all this time, which is beautiful. She loves it. And yesterday she wanted to make sweet potato chips. I'm like, yeah, you can do that. Like, look up a recipe. So the recipe she found baked them. Like I was picturing like frying them. Okay. I said, well, we don't have a mandolin, like use the food processor blade and get them even. And sweet potatoes are so finicky. So they went from almost done to half of them went black in a minute. Yeah. She's like, I was checking them, Mom. I was checking them and like the whole house stunk. It was an issue. And I admit I was a little bit unsure how to handle that. I'm like, oh, I wish I would have told you, I wish I would have saved you from that by saying like, they react so fast and they might get black, Yeah. She was very mad. She was so mad. But I mean, hopefully I did a few right things, focused on the half that weren't black, right? We talked about, well, you've got some more sweet potatoes in the food processor. Tomorrow, let's try a different way. And now you know how sensitive they are. So you'll know to like babysit them with your life, like seconds count here. So hopefully, I mean, I guess we're still in the messy middle of that story, right? Hopefully she comes out on the other side like, okay, I got through this. I got some sweet potato chips at the end, And
I think like, if you burn your sweet potato chips the first time, you're going to know you're going to watch them every time after that, right? Like the things that I failed miserably at are the things I'm going to remember the most. So, and I know how you're saying like, oh, I wonder if I should have protected her from that. I should have done that. Yeah. The beauty of life is there's always going to be another opportunity, right? So I almost want to say in the big picture, if you like, wish you could have done something better that one time, it's fine because you're gonna have like 40 more examples of something where you can do it better. So it's not about being I always tell my friends, it's not about being perfect that one time. It's about being like, okay, I wonder if this would have gone better if I had done X, Y, or Z. So kind of reflecting on it and just saying like, life is going to give me another opportunity to try it a different way. So just like, you're thinking, oh, she burned her sweet potatoes, and you're thinking to yourself, oh, I maybe did that wrong. It's fine. There's going to be more sweet potatoes. There's going to be another thing to cook, and there's going to be another way to kind of direct and respond if you want to.
Well, you're speaking to my heart and my insecurities right now. So thank
Right.
you. I mean, we have a lot of anxiety as parents too, right?
Yes.
The advent of screens has definitely changed our brains too. It's
Right. And it's
difficult.
always easy to see these parents online who they just look like they are doing such an amazing job.
Right.
Or we document like, my kid ate broccoli with a fork today. And, or I had this horrible fight with my kid, but I repaired it. And you think, well, you had one horrible fight with your kid? Like, I've had 40 in one day. Right. And so we just have to remember, yep, it's all a mess. It's all hard. We're all doing the best we can, and we're not posting everything on social media.
Yep. We've got to all avoid comparisonitis. Well, you might have just answered my last question, because I love to leave parents with a message of hope.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm like, oh, you just did it. I was going to ask you to encourage parents in one way, but yeah, what do you want parents to just walk away remembering? Like, this was a lot. We should probably all watch this 3 times. So
okay, I have
good
2
and
things.
so practical. 2
Yeah.
things. We're on it.
Okay. So one thing is that if you are already asking yourself and checking in with yourself and being like, did that go okay? Could I have done better? You're probably hitting it, right? Dan Siegel and Tina Payne Bryson, who both study like whole brain parenting and how to encourage brain development, they say if you respond to your kid with attunement and checking in and purposefulness 30% of the time, you're fine. So if you're already asking yourself that, you're probably hitting 30% of the time, and your kid's going to be great. So I love 30%. I feel like I can do 30% most days. And the other thing I would say is just always think about this. First, we connect and we, validate their emotions. We show them that we understand. We make them feel like we understand. And then we do the boundary, or we, reiterate our value. But that 2-handed approach always starts with the relationship first.
Man, so powerful, so practical, exactly how I love my information. I knew this would be a good one. Thank you so very much for helping us all lift our anxiety as parents and as teens. Really important. Thank you so much, Andi.
Thank you, Katie. It's been great.
So much. Everyone, we will be back next week with another expert. We are kind of coming to a close. I'll be taking the summer off of the Healthy Parenting Connector for my own anxiety's sake, right? We all just need a little break. So we're going to be replaying some of our favorites, some of our most powerful, some of our favorite recipes from the kids over the summer, and back to school time, as long as that happens. No anxiety there at all. No anxiety there at all. There will be a normal again. And it's so good to remember that if we're responding, basically, if we care, we're doing okay. And we're climbing the hill in the right direction. We were made to do hard things. See you next week, everybody.